Hey everybody, it's Ryan with Propelio. Today we've got Steven Rozenberg in from Empire Industries, property management place. I know it's kind of an off day, but we're like, hey, well, what the hell, let's go live. Steven's kind of, he's going to be our property management guru, per se, for our academy. And we're like, hell, you've made it all the way up from Houston to hang out with us. Let's do a special live session for anybody who's watching. Today we're going to be talking about mistakes that are common among landlords. So as always, join the conversation, get on board, ask questions, we'll get those answered. Give some love, drop some fire emojis and some pregnant emojis. Yeah, those. And that's about it. So Steven, what's up, man?
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
So let's get into it. We're talking about mistakes, common mistakes landlords make, maybe throwing some horror stories.
Yeah, I got a few of those.
What do you think the number one mistake landlords make?
Well, let me just start by saying I can say this because I was one of them.
Okay.
So I was one of those guys that has made these mistakes in the past. So these mistakes that I'm talking about, I'm not just pontificating on something that I don't know. I mean, some of these are mistakes that I actually made.
Right.
But I would say the number one reason or number one problem people have with being a self-landlord and the number one mistake they make is that they don't run it like a business. I think a lot of times what happens is a lot of investors get into this industry and you get so focused on the deal, right? The deal is what's sexy, right? The art of the deal, the negotiation, the flipping, the wholesaling, everyone loves that. And you get these fancy numbers, the 20%, 30% cash on cash return, the ROI, you get all these things, but no one ever thinks, how am I going to get that out of it for the next 20 years? Because we're so focused on what is the interest rate of my hard money loan? What is my insurance quote? What is this? What is that? They buy all this and it's like buying a nice tree from the nursery, getting the best tree you can find, getting the best soil, taking it home, putting it in the ground, never watering it, and wondering why the tree died and never bared the fruit that it promised.
Right.
And that's what happens in real estate is they don't think about the after effect. They think about everything up to the deal. And they go, oh, it should just happen on its own, right?
Right.
Passive income. I'm just going to hang out, and it's just going to mailbox money.
Right, and then it's almost like they forget the human element as well.
The human element, and again, it is a business. There are laws and regulations, and there are things that you need to know that this will come back and bite you if you don't run it like a business. And I think that's the biggest challenge people have is that they don't understand that there's so much involved in owning a rental property. A rental property is a inanimate, non-emotional object, right? It is a vehicle to give you a return, just like intellectual property, just like stocks, right? There's no difference. Everyone equates living in a house. You and I live in a house, so we equate living in a house to owning a rental property. And they go, well, I live in that house, should be very similar.
Right.
And it's not. It's a business. And I tell people, being a semi-failed investor in the past, but being a property management company now, I tell them, you own a business. It's 4 walls and a roof. There's a business that's running inside of that, and you are the CEO of that business.
Right.
And if you don't have the correct operating system, your business will fail.
Well, and what blows my mind is recently I was looking at a house, potentially trying to buy it, and the owner was in a negative cash flow situation only because of the human element where she felt bad for her tenants.
Yeah.
So because she felt bad for her tenants, she was still getting cash, but it was a negative cash flow. But now she's being foreclosed on because she's not making the adequate payments to pay off the loan and the mortgage on the house. So not only has she screwed herself because of I want to do right by my tenants, but so everybody's gonna be screwed in that situation because of the human element and negative cash flow.
And to me, that's a whole other thing. That person is not qualified to run a business.
Right.
And I tell them, just because you own the house doesn't mean you're qualified to run the business. And I tell them, if you were the CEO of that business, if I owned the company and I hired you as my CEO, and you told me I'm letting someone stay in your business for free, I would say you are going to be fired. Because you're not doing your job. Your fiduciary responsibility is to the owners of the company. It's not to the tenant. And you have to realize that, yes, the tenants are important and they're vital to the business, but you're not, you're breaking some of your rules in your business model. And if you say, I don't have a business model, that's a bigger problem.
Right.
And so the thing is people think that because they own the property that they can bend the rules. Well, I'll let them slide. the reality is, and this is some of the mistakes people have, is that when you have a lease agreement, you have a contract. You have an obligation that you have to abide by the contract, and it is a bilateral agreement. I'm not an attorney, but I'm just saying that it is.
There it is.
Yeah, there's the disclaimer, right? But it's a bilateral contract that if the tenant doesn't perform, you, the landlord, in the contract have to perform. So if they don't pay rent on the 1st, it's considered late on the 3rd.
Right.
So the big mistake, first of all, that people get into, that landlords, one of the first mistakes is they don't set the expectations properly with the tenant.
And they don't define.
They don't define what the roles are going to be. So the best thing you can do with a tenant, we can just kind of get into this, is that, look, you have an obligation to pay rent. I have an obligation to give you a safe, comfortable, clean living experience. I'm going to do my job, and you're going to do your job. And now in this lease agreement, we're going to define what that means. Let's go through it and make sure we're clear.
Yeah, what's interesting is because when you're talking, one of my best friends, he's evicted people like you do, and what the common theme he gets from all of his tenants are, he is the best landlord they've ever had. Even the ones he's had to kick out of his house because he spelled out from day one what all the expectations are. Your AC's broken? Let me know. It'll be fixed that day. You have a leaky roof? Let me know. It'll be fixed that day. So from a landlord's perspective, he's doing everything he's supposed to do. If they don't pay, well, guess what? Get out of the house.
Well, so here,
and at the same time, it's like, and they're very apologetic that they couldn't pay, and because he did everything he was supposed to. Because I think a lot of times people want to be the nice person. They're not running it like a business.
We're going to get along. It's going to be great.
Yeah, they're afraid of being the asshole. For basically saying you need to pay to be here.
It's my business. This is you can't go to your mortgage lender and go, hey, they're having a hard time. It's Christmas. Can we let them slide? They're going to go, no. We're running a business. We have shareholders we're responsible to. The biggest challenge I think a lot of landlords have is they are not responsible to anyone. They don't have to. They are not accountable. If they had a boss that they had to report to, they would have a different opinion on how things are going to go. And I think one of the biggest challenges that a lot of landlords have is they don't even understand the business of being a landlord. So they have not done their homework to define. And again, I was one of them. And so one story, you were talking about stories. So when we first started, Pete Newbig, my partner, and I used to always love to go get the rents, right? I'm like, I'm going to drive around. It's the 1st of the month, 2nd of the month, whatever. I'm going to drive around and get the rents. And we had owned apartments and stuff before, but he says, why are you going to get the rent? And I said, well, I want to make sure I get the money.
He wants to make sure they see his guns.
I want to make sure they get the money, you know?
You get afraid.
So he says, you can do it. I'm not going. I'm like, all right, fine. So you go around, and of course, you know, I'll have it on Friday. It's Wednesday. Like, okay, you're going to have it on Friday. I'll have it on Friday. So then you come back on Friday, you know, you're looking in the driveway. You see cars in the driveway. You're like, okay, I know they're home. Looking in the window, no one's answering the door. And you're like, you know, I just drove all this way for nothing. You know?
Right.
So now you start getting a little upset because now you feel like you're getting taken advantage of. So then you call them up, or, you know, their cricket phones or whatever are disconnected the minute they call.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happens, but it does. So anyways, you know, the next week you call them up. Oh, yeah, sorry, I get paid on the 14th. I'll have it on the 14th. You sure you're going to have it? Yeah, I'm sure. So this is the cycle I'm going through. Pete finally says, Steve, they've been renting their whole life. You think they don't know when rents due?
Right.
Either they're training you or you're training them. Either you're going to show them that you are running a business this way, or they're going to show you how we're running your business.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the first nugget of the morning. Either they're training you or you're training them.
That was it, you know.
That's a huge nugget.
It was
right
huge
there.
because, you know what, after a while I finally realized, you know what, he's right. Like, we need to set parameters and policies and procedures. And you know what? If you don't, it's like in the airlines, right? The plane leaves at 12:02. They don't care if you're stuck in traffic, truck security line. The plane leaves. You can have all the reasons in the world, but you're going to be talking to a jetway that has no plane attached to it now.
Right.
And so that's the common thing. It is a lot of these landlords don't realize that they have to run it like a business, and there's so many procedures that have to be followed. You know, the landlord is the highest sued in real estate. And the reason is there's more governing agencies watching the tenant than probably all of us combined. And they're protecting their rights. And unfortunately, the one person who doesn't know all that is the landlord.
Right.
And they don't realize that there's fair housing, there's discrimination, we have Texas property code, we have eviction laws. There's all these things that you don't realize. And, you know, we get a lot of owners, you know, we manage a lot of properties, a lot of owners from out of country. and they say, well, I want to see this and I want to see that. And we'd say, well, we can't show that to you. We can't give that to you. We can't tell you that because it's the law.
Right.
Well, it's my house. It's your structure. It's our business. We are running the business that's inside of that structure. So either you want us to be the successful business model, and it's kind of, I talk to owners all the time, and I ask them, do you own any stock? And they'll say, yeah. And I say, give me the name of a stock you own. And I own Chase. I go, okay, if Chase is not doing well, do you go to the headquarters of Chase Bank and stick your head in the building and, hey, guys, what's going on? Why? I want some disclosures. I want some information. No, because you realize that there are laws and regulations of things they can't do. Again, because you live in that house, you feel that you have a certain right without knowing the laws, without knowing the business. And, my whole thing is if you sit down prior, just like having the expectation meeting with the tenant, and have an expectation meeting of yourself of what to expect and what sandbox you're playing in, a lot of these problems go away because it's just that it's kind of that sharpening the axe all day and taking one swing or just swinging with a dull axe all day.
Right.
And that's the problem a lot of people have is, and we've got a list of the top mistakes. And again, I was victim of doing these myself, so I'm not throwing rocks from a glass house or anything. I mean, these are legit. And it's just one of those things that people need to realize that real estate, when I first got into real estate from being an airline pilot and 9/11 and that whole story, is that there are a lot of people that got wealthy with real estate. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, this works. There is a system that works around it. You just got to fix it and make sure that it works around your life and what you're doing. So, when I bought a lot of properties, and Pete and I, we had apartment complexes, and then we bought some low-end houses. Our challenge is our business model. Well, we didn't really have a business model, number one, but if we did have one, it was wrapped around the wrong type of business.
So maybe that's another tip.
If
you're getting into real estate, maybe have some sort of game plan.
Yeah, have a game plan.
Sort of model or roadmap.
You got to have a model, and there's just so many things that people need to think about. And it's not a matter, I tell them, it's not a matter of being perfect. It's a matter of being consistent. And I tell people, our company, we're a fantastic company. We're growing. We're doing all that. We don't do one great thing. It's not like we do some magical handshake that makes this work. We do a lot of things consistently that anyone can do. If you're a self-landlord, you can do these things. You just have to take the proper time to plan and know what you're getting into. It's like playing with an electrical box and never even understanding the power and electricity.
Right.
The chances of you getting hurt are pretty good.
Right.
It's the same thing. This electricity just happens to be lawsuits and litigation and all that stuff.
Right.
That's why people get taken advantage of and they go, oh, real estate sucks because I lost all my money. But then when you start dissecting what the problem was, it's like, well, wait a second. You did this, then you did this, then you shouldn't have done this. And they're like, yeah. Okay, maybe it's not real estate. Because to me, real estate is an inanimate object. It is just a vehicle to get you. It's a mathematical equation. That's all it is.
Right.
Buy one, sell one. Buy one, rent one. Whatever it is. And people have a hard time. They put the emotions into it.
Yeah, and again, like you said, it's step one, treat it like a business.
Absolutely.
Whether you're owner financing, renting, buying, flipping, wholesaling, it's got to be a business. If you've got a steal of a deal, I'm not going to be like, hey, Steven, do you want this because we're buddies? You're going to be like, okay, the agenda there is I still want to make money on this, but I want to give this to you because you're buddies, but I'm still going to make money and then maybe further that relationship. So everything in real estate, everything has agenda.
It's a business.
Yeah, but before we move on, I just want to say shout out to everybody watching. Fred Buy Houses, thanks. He made the point of exactly remove the emotion from the tenants and hire a property manager if you can't. That's right. If you have a bleeding heart where you're getting taken advantage of it all the time, get a guy who's going to show up at the door and be like, give me my damn money.
Well, I tell people all the time, it's very similar to being a pilot. I'll use this analogy, but it's like if you want to fly to Hawaii, you could do it yourself. Mm-hmm. You could get in a plane, you can take lessons, and you can launch yourself to Hawaii. The odds of you making it, slim to none. But you could give it a shot. Same thing with managing a portfolio. If you want to be successful, you could try it yourself. You could learn, you're going to learn your licks, you're going to learn your lessons. We didn't do anything magical. We learned our lessons and became successful despite of our mistakes. And I think those were very helpful to us. Or you could just say, you know what, I'm going to buy a ticket and ride in the back. Choice is yours. You can do it however you want. But I think you asked what one of the biggest mistakes people have. I would say the business model, but I'm going to take that back. I'm going to recant that. I think one of the biggest mistakes people have, whether it's a business or properties or anything, is they don't know what the goal is for doing it.
Right.
They don't get into this saying, this is the end goal of why I'm doing this.
I want to have a rental portfolio. Why?
Well, that was just it. So here's a perfect example. So Pete and I started buying these houses. We started buying low-end houses because on paper, they were fantastic cash-on-cash return. They were 50, 60% cash-on-cash return deals. They were, it was like, we can't lose, right?
Right.
The problem was these were low-end properties that were never going to appreciate. Had somebody came to me and said, hey, Steve, why are you guys buying those? You're an airline pilot. Pete's in the IT industry. You don't need the monthly cash flow.
Right.
You need something that's going to appreciate in value that in 30 years is worth 3 times the amount. If somebody would have said that to me, I would have started thinking differently. But instead, it looked like a great deal, looks like a duck, quacks like a duck. I'm eating duck tonight, right?
Right.
So the problem is no one ever asked me, why are you doing this? What's the end goal for this? So if I said, hey, I want to have an appreciation value of X% and I want to have $50 million in real estate, they would have said, well, buying these $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 houses, that's not going to get you to your goal.
Right.
So I think the biggest challenge is that a lot of people never start with a goal, and you start with the goal and then you work backwards, and that backwards working is your strategy. So if you said, hey, I want to have 20 properties in 20 years paid off, it's like, okay, that's the goal. That's Disneyland. We're going to Disneyland.
Right.
How are we getting to Disneyland? What are the freeways we're going to take? Well, first we got to buy, in the first 10 years, we have to buy all these properties. So you have to buy 2 properties a year, and then for the last 10 years, we'll pay them off. Now we're starting to get the strategy zoned in. You say, okay, the first 10 years, we're going to buy these properties. That means we're going to buy 2 properties a year. That means every 3 months, we got to be looking for something, and then we got to close on something. We got to get it made ready. Then you start backing it out of like, okay, how am I going to buy 2 properties a year? Do I even have the money to financially make that work? And then you may look at that and say, you know what? That's a good deal. That doesn't work. That strategy doesn't work, so maybe that's not an obtainable
Basically,
goal.
you're just reverse engineering your goals.
You're reverse engineering it, exactly. And so a lot of times people will come to me and they'll say, hey, Steve, is this a good deal? Well, I don't know. I don't know what a good deal is to you. You may have a different good deal than me. Depends on your goals. And so I always tell people, you have to have the goal, and the first question is, does it align with your goals? If you can't answer that, then maybe it's not a good deal. It could be a good deal, but you may have to change your goal. Or you just have to realize that that is not aligned with what you're trying to do. Look, we all get deals that come in front of us and you're just like, that's a slamming deal, I'm going to take it, right?
Right.
But just realize, is that in line with your goal, and are you taking energy away from achieving your goal by seeing a shiny object and going for that shiny object?
So basically, to recap the first 15 minutes here is, A, make sure that run your business like a business. 2, set your goal, but then reverse engineering how to get to that goal and stay on that roadmap.
Absolutely. It's so important. And education is the key.
Right.
And I'm very, very big in trying to help people and educate them because, look, no one helped Pete and I. We were out there learning, and we were learning our mistakes, and we were getting our butts kicked. And if you've ever had those sleepless nights of 35 mortgages and you're not sure how you're going to pay them, and you're going, what am I going to do? And it's not a very good feeling. And I tell people, I'm like, I don't wish that on anyone because I've been there and it is not fun.
Well, speaking of education, Sally Brooks Riddle, she had a couple questions. One, what tenant screening sites or software do you recommend?
So I'll answer that, but first let me just say, one of our biggest mistakes, go back to horror stories,
right,
was we constantly put the wrong person in our property. When we had about 30, 40 properties, we had a 30% eviction rate. I mean, they were coming in as quick as they were going out.
What's like a good, what's standard,
well,
and what's a good
now
rate?
We manage almost 900 properties and we have a 1% eviction rate.
Okay.
So a good is 0.
Well, yeah.
But the industry average is probably somewhere between, I'm going to say 5 to 10% is probably about realistic. We have a 1% because we got our butts kicked so bad before. We go full scale the other way. And what we've learned is that when you put the right person in, that takes a lot of these problems away. So the one thing that we've realized, if you look at their past, you see their future. If you see a tenant that's skipped and they're owing money and they're job to job to job, they are not going to change their ways because you have a nice house with nice carpet and paint. You're not going to change them and go, I'm going to help this person and give them something, and they're going to be a better person because of it, and we're going to live happy. You got to be realistic. You got to be pragmatic. And you have to sit there and say, okay, let me look at the data, and the data is going to tell you a story. That data is their background check. So we are very, very strict in who we take. And if anybody wants that, they can email me and I'll share what our qualifications are, because it's so, so important to set that in the beginning. Now, what we do is we use a third-party company. They do all the background. They do the screening, the tenant selection. I don't know if I can say who they are, but so a good friend of ours, Jason Wagner with AccuTrack, okay, is the name of their company. If anybody wants, they can PM me. I'll introduce you. Great guy. They screen the tenant. They call the landlord. They verify employment. They do everything. We give him our qualifications, and we get back a thumbs up or thumbs down.
Okay.
The biggest challenge people have, one of the biggest reasons people are sued in real estate is discrimination. And they say, well, who do I take? For example, I've got this tenant makes, $4,000 a month, and this tenant makes $3,000 a month. This one is a single mom with 4 kids. This is a married couple. Which one do you take? You got to be careful, because now it starts becoming a slippery slope, right? You take one over the other, and are you discriminating?
You have to define why.
You got to have your qualifications.
But if you have a third party doing it for you,
the third party does it, and they say, you know what? We do a first come, first serve. So whoever applies first, fits our qualification, pays the money, they get it. That's it. We do not go down that slope, because, oh, you didn't pick me because I'm a single mom with kids. You didn't pick me because we don't have kids. Right. You could be screwed either way.
It goes back. We talk about that frequently here at Propelio, in the sense that when you are a real estate investor, regardless of experience, regardless of how many millions or not millions you have in your bank account, if you get in a legal battle in any situation, you're already handicapped tremendously.
Yeah.
So every step of the way, you need to cover your rear, CYA, to the point where if you can get in front of a judge and be like, look, I have all the emails, I have all the back paperwork, I have third party this, third party that, to where I did everything.
You got to disclose everything, and you got to have that paper trail.
Because just because you're a real estate investor, you're the big bad real estate investor, so you're always going to be in the wrong.
You are always looked at as someone who could be a predator on people and taking advantage of them. That's the perception. And right, wrong, or indifferent, you have to defend that. And so another thing that we do, did that answer? I think that answered
Sally
the
did, and she did also say, what do you recommend for online rent collection?
We do everything through our software. We use a software called Propertyware, and so the Propertyware is what collects our rent. I'm sure there's a lot of third-party companies out there that you can collect rents from and everything.
Right.
We do a lot of rent collection. I mean, we're collecting about $1.3 million a month in rent. So we have a lot of money that's coming in and out, for all of our properties. But
did you have a system, or did you build your own? Or?
We bought it. It's called Propertyware, and they're actually up here in Carrollton.
Okay. So Sally, hopefully that answers both of those questions.
Yeah. Now going back to one of the mistakes, and I'm just going to kind of keep flowing here with this.
Yeah, let's just keep going.
When you put the tenant in, the expectations, the number one, could you guess, let me ask this, can you guess what the number one reason landlords are sued on? The number one lawsuit reason, what would you guess? Anyone?
I would say from the very beginning of equal housing and fair housing and making sure, like, oh, he didn't let me get in the house or something like that.
Believe it or not, it's security deposit disposition.
Oh, okay.
It's the back end. Because look at what happens. The tenant moves out. The landlord looks around, how many move-outs do they get on average? They may get one every 2 years or something. So it's not something they're used to, right? So imagine the tenant moves out and they're like, yeah, that carpet's messed up and there's a thing in the wall, and yeah, well, shit, what do I charge? Well, I make $40 an hour. I'm here for 3 hours, so I'm gonna charge $120 because that just seems right. And the perception is that the landlord doesn't want to give back any of the deposit.
Right.
One of the bigger challenges, the landlord doesn't realize that they need to be responsible for that money. A lot of times they spend that money.
Right.
It's not their money to spend. It's a deposit held in lieu of the tenant not performing.
Yeah, and then like if you're a big company, and aren't you supposed to have hold that in escrow?
It's got to be in a separate escrow
account all together?
Yeah. So here's the challenge. The tenant moves out. Tenant says, wait a second, that's wear and tear, not damage, which is the difference. And, that was damaged when I got in.
Yeah.
And now it's a he said, she said. And that's how it ends up going to litigation. And, by law in the state of Texas, you have 30 days to get that back to the tenant. Whether it's a $0 or it's the full deposit, you have 30 days to get that back to them, right? If not, you can be held liable for 3 times the amount, okay? So you've got to take some pretty quick action. So what we do, a good tip that self-landlords can do is prior to the tenant moving in, we will go in and take about 150 pictures of that property in a full video.
Right.
Okay. Literally room to slide to curtains. Take pictures digital, right? It costs you nothing to store it, right?
Exactly.
Take these pictures. Now, when the tenant signs the lease, one of the documents that they sign is acknowledging what our fees are going to be at a minimum when they move out. If there is a dirty carpet, minimum $75 per stain cleaning fee. Light bulb missing, $3. No key, $25. So we have 2 pages of itemized lists that they have to sign and acknowledge. These are minimum fees. This is what we are going to charge you. And Mr. Tenant, before you moved in, we just took 150 pictures of this property. We know exactly how it looks.
Right.
Our goal is to give you back all your security deposit. That's our goal. We gave you the house with professionally cleaned carpets. We expect it back with professionally cleaned.
And again, going back to, we were talking about how, like, you go in front of a judge, immediately you're the big bad investor. It's because there's so many, quote unquote, slumlords who give you a shitty house.
Yep.
And when they get it back, they don't give you back your security deposit because they want a better condition house.
Exactly.
Not a like for like.
Yeah, and so when the tenant moves out, we go back through, do the same pictures, 150, exactly the same way. Now we have before and we have after, and we have the signed document that's acknowledging what our fees are going to be. So when we go in to do the make ready, dirty carpet, 75. Hole in the wall, 110. And we just go through and check it off. So if we ever have to go in front of the judge, they say, where'd you come up with this price point? We go, well, here's 150 pictures of the property before, here's pictures after, and here's the acknowledgement of the sheet that they signed of what we are going to charge them. Again, we don't do anything great. We're just consistent with what we do. And then the judge goes, looks pretty straightforward to me.
So it sounds to me like, to going back in that theme of just throwing out random tips is have a system for how you're doing everything.
Consistency.
Consistency and systems.
This is a system. This is a system-based business. This is owning a property is not. There is a personal section of it, obviously, but it's all about systems. It's all about policies and procedures and sticking to them. Because one thing people don't realize. So I had one time I was doing an eviction, and. It's another good lesson they can learn. I was doing an eviction, and Pete and I was living in an eviction court because I always put the wrong person in. Shocker, when you put bad credit okay, guess what people apply for your house? Bad credit. Shitty credit, right? Yeah, so they drive up with all the stuff in their car, and you're thinking, wow, how lucky am I? This guy's ready to move in, and he's got a security deposit special and blah, blah, blah. And, 3 weeks later, he's leaving and he's taking parting gifts like wiring and electrical and ceiling fans and everything he could fit back in his shitty car, and he's driving off with half
and you're
the
like,
house.
I promise, I didn't.
He seemed like such a good guy.
Who would have known?
Yeah, so anyway, one of the things that I was in eviction court, and there was a person in front of me, and the judge says to the person, well, what's going on? He says, well, I'm evicting this person. I'm sick and tired. They're always late on their rent. They never pay. Typical story, right? And so the judge is sitting there listening, and he says, well, let me ask you this. He goes, have they ever been late on their rent before? And he says, yeah, they're late, and then they catch up, and then they're late. And he goes, okay. He goes, so when they're late, do you charge them late fees? And he goes, well, sometimes I do, but sometimes I feel bad. And it's, they're going to have it on Friday and goes through. And he says, I'm just sick and tired of them. I just want them gone because I'm tired of dealing and giving them deals and them making me pissed and blah, blah, blah. So the judge says, well, let me get this straight. You want to pick and choose when you enforce that lease agreement. You think you have the right to decide when you're going to enforce it and when you're not going to enforce it. He says, you don't have that right. You have an obligation to enforce that side of the contract. That's a bilateral contract. He said, you have to enforce it just like you expect them to enforce their side.
So what you're saying is the judge was saying by this gentleman not enforcing late fees, he was himself breach of contract.
He was in breach of contract, and he said, you know what, I'm dismissing the case. Good luck.
Because he was trying to be a nice guy.
Because he was trying to, so that's the point, is by trying to be a nice guy and not running your business like a business, sticking, because it's all CYA. It's all making sure that everything is backed up. He said, because you don't get to pick and choose that. You have an obligation. It's a bilateral contract. It's not one way.
Yeah, and that's one of those things I would never even think of. Like, because you think
you're being nice.
You think you're being nice,
yeah. And then all of a
And the
sudden
judge-
another tenant goes, wait a second, I never got to slide. Are you
And then
discriminating against me?
Discrimination, yeah.
Now it's a fair housing issue. Now you're like, wait a second, I was just trying to be a nice guy.
Yeah.
So you got to be very, very careful. It's again,
And then this thing is going back to the theme of the systems. Is I could just see somebody going up, hey, I've got my first rental, hey, and then just being very like chatty Cathy,
Trying to get along.
and not really having, yeah, well, don't worry about that, or oh, I'll take care of this, and just verbally talking about stuff versus spelling everything out. And then when you do get a house that's just completely damaged, you have no proof of pictures, nothing.
Nothing. Because there's no systems in place.
He said, she said, and a he
Exactly.
said, she said situation versus a judge. Chances are a judge is going to be on their side.
Well, and the thing is they're going to say, look, you're running a business poorly.
Right.
You got into this business and you did not prepare to run this business correctly. So shame on you.
Right.
Not shame on the tenant. So
yeah, let's get some more mistakes, because I know we've been to like two of them.
So yeah, exactly. So one of the things I have is not pricing the property correctly.
Okay.
So, we all buy a property and we pie in the sky. Now, you guys have a great system that can help people identify price points of what a house should be,
right,
and all that,
which is
rentals and all that. So what happens is what do we all do? We go to the big number. Our greed factor steps in and we go, hey, I think, the average is $1,400 to $1,600. I'm going to try for $1,650.
Right.
So what happens is they price themselves out of the market. Let's say the rent is really $1,500. $1,550 is the sweet spot.
Right.
What happens is the people that are looking for a house between $1,400 and $1,600 are not even seeing, because now in search engines you can say $1,400 to $1,600. Your property at $1,650 doesn't even get into the search. Mm-hmm. So what happens? What people don't realize is for every 2 weeks that your property sits vacant, you are losing 2% of your annual cash flow revenue that you will never recapture. So what happens is all of a sudden that property's sitting empty, and next thing you know, a month goes by, you're never going to recapture. That's a whole month of cash flow. And the biggest thing that people don't think about is the mental strain of it.
Yeah, and then when you talk about, put it that way, where for every 2 weeks you're losing 2% of your annual cash flow on that property, because I've got a house that cash flows $1,000 a month, woohoo! In the grand scheme of things, $1,000 is okay, cool. It's $1,000. Yes, $1,000 is a lot of money, but whatever. Oh, I've got $1 million portfolio, whatever. But when you put it in terms of it's 2%, and again, even 2% may not seem like a lot, but
it's just math. It's a mathematical equation.
But you got to think, if you got $1 million portfolio, 2% of $1 million, that's going to hurt.
Well, what people don't, and again, it's a business, and people hang their hat. There's maybe another conversation, but people hang their hat on cash flow.
Right.
When it was someone like me, I was buying things based on cash flow when that really wasn't even important to me.
Right.
But I thought it was important. So a lot of people think cash flow, they think that $50 a month is like some psychological, I got it, I got what I needed. But if it's sitting empty for a month and a half, you should have just rented it for $1,550, you would have been done. And again, if you've never been in this position and you don't have that mental strain of a bunch of vacant properties not earning you revenue, and you're going into your pocket paying mortgages.
Well, not even that, but if you have multiple vacants, not only is it not making you money, every night you go to bed, you're going, is somebody burning my shit home?
Well, that's just it. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've had them vandalized. You go back and, the neighbors helped themselves like a little garage sale. They stole all our shit, and you're like, so, I mean, there's multiple problems with it being vacant. And people just don't think about that. They're thinking about, I want to get $1,650. So pricing it incorrectly, and then the person that takes it is normally taking it because nobody else would accept them. And that's a big problem. So all of a sudden someone goes, again, I'll take it as is. Perfect. Let me move in tomorrow. You're like, why?
Right.
Why do you want to move in tomorrow? Why are you willing to pay above rent?
Yeah, because again, and as an investor, because there's so many strategies, you need to make sure you're separating your strategies and separating your mindset. Because if I'm doing an owner finance house, hell yeah, I'm going to owner finance that as is, because in my mind, I'm believing, well, they're going to fix that up. A rental situation, they're not going to fix that shit up.
No,
so
exactly.
you need to wait. As is rental, you need to slam on the brakes, really understand what's going on.
Again, you got don't be in this fairyland that you think that this shit's just going to happen. It doesn't happen.
Right.
You have to be realistic. The other thing is people always say, like, I don't want pets. Because everybody thinks in their mind of this huge Great Dane running through the house and just tearing shit up. Mm-hmm. What people don't realize, a big landlord tip that we tell clients is 80% of renters have a form of pet. A goldfish is a form of pet. But the way search engines work, if you click no pets, you've just taken 80% of the potential renters that are not even going to see your house.
And not only that is, again, I'm not being an advocate for pets, but I'm just assuming if they're one of the main reasons they're looking to rent from, say, your property is because maybe they can't rent in an apartment because of pet
Right.
rules.
And the thing is, look, I have seen children do more damage than pets in houses.
Right.
So when people, I recommend case-by-case basis. But at least get yourself into the game and get yourself into the search engine to be able to have people find you. Because, look, obscurity is your biggest problem. If no one can even see your property,
right,
you've just knocked out 80% of the potential renters out there. Why would you not at least say, because, again, you take someone with a goldfish and they go, wait a second, you're discriminating against me. You said no pets. Mm-hmm. Now you took someone with a pet. And you're going, well, it's just a goldfish. Well, by definition, by the law, that is a pet. So again, it's just a slippery slope that you got to be very, very careful. If you just said pets on a case-by-case basis, at least you're opening that up for people to at least be able to engage and see your property. And that's really the key, is being able to get someone to see you.
Real quick, what's your, are you reading any books right now?
I am. I just finished, I've read Crush It and Crushing It a couple times. Right now, I'm rereading 10X, Grant Cardone's 10X, yeah.
So we like to do a book giveaway every once in a while. So if you're watching this video, drop in the comments below, just ask questions, get engaged, and at the end of the video, we'll do a random comment picker and we'll give away 10X. And basically, the more comments you throw down, the more opportunities you have to be in the drawing. But again, hopefully you're enjoying this. Drop some comments, drop some hearts, some love, some fire emojis and whatnot.
Fire emojis, yeah.
I love it. So I know you got a big list. We don't have to hit all of them, but let's hit the highlights.
Well, I think one of the other problems people have is vendors, dealing with vendors. Mm-hmm. So, the vendor's kind of that guy who they don't really want to talk to until they need him. And then when they need him, then they'll do anything to get him. And, whether you have one property or you have 50 properties, setting up those relationships with vendors, the plumbers, the AC guys, or knowing the people that work with them a lot, is very, very important. Because, we, as a management company, obviously we have a lot of vendors, right? But we treat them as good as we can treat them. I mean, we have vendor appreciation parties. We have vendor of the year awards. We want they help us with our business. They keep our clients happy. We check up on them. So when you're...
But you could even take that even further than business or property management in your bit. Like, I know our title company, like, she gave us a property not too long ago where somebody didn't close on a house and the contract was just open. They're like, hey, you want a house?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can close on that.
Yeah, we'll take it.
Like, does your title company bring you houses?
Yeah. And, one of the things I tell people, so let's say...
Anyway, my point there was be nice to your vendors.
Absolutely, because, I mean, first of all, they make you look good or bad.
Yeah.
You get a shitty tile guy or plumber, and he's got to go back there 5 times and fix something. All of a sudden, now you look, they don't care about the plumber. They are going, you suck. Yeah. And you're going, well, I'm not the one doing the plumbing. Doesn't matter. They don't care. They don't look at it that way. So, again, that is a reflection on you. So going with cheaper is not always cheaper. I've learned, because we used to try to get the Chuck in a truck, the guy that was driving around. You'd have to meet him at Home Depot because he didn't have any money.
Right.
And, you got to get his car out of impound because he's got your hot water heater and he went drinking over the weekend. We're getting the truck. I mean, these are stories that we've done. And you learn, like, okay, we're like adult daycare, with these guys. They can't run their business, but they're going to do this bang-up job for $10 an hour cheaper. Mm-hmm. Cheaper is not cheaper, and we've learned that. Now, obviously, I don't advocate paying top dollar retail, but I also want to make sure that whoever I'm doing business with, something that people don't think about is whoever's going into that property, are they licensed and insured?
Right.
Because when you have a tenant in that house, so here's an example. I knew a guy, his property management company, I think he was in Austin or something. He had a guy, a maintenance worker. Maintenance guy went into the property, needed to do a bigger job, and went to Home Depot, got a helper, went into the property, started working on the property, and tenant was living there. They left. Tenant says, hey, I had some jewelry on the counter. The jewelry's gone. So they call the management company. Management company's like, I don't know, let me call my maintenance guy. So they call the maintenance guy, who they've had forever.
Right.
But he's chucking a truck kind of guy. And they said, hey, was there any jewelry? And he goes, I didn't see any. They said, were you the only one in the house? He goes, no, I had a worker. I had a guy with me. And they were like, well, who was the guy? I don't know, someone I picked up at Home Depot. They're like, well, who was he? I don't know. Did he do anything? I don't know. We were working, right? I mean, typical story. It ended up costing the management company over $10,000. How do you prove it, right?
Yeah.
There's no license. The guy he has no insurance. So again, cheaper is not cheaper.
Because again,
I'm with you.
I don't want to stereotype, but the likelihood of somebody who's renting a property having $10,000 worth of jewelry just sitting out, yeah.
I get it. Look, I get it. But it's your word against his, right? You know, another story of somebody doing some work, you know, you get a yard guy cutting the yard or something, you know, and there was a story where a guy, you know, basically chopped his finger or did something stupid, and all of a sudden the owner gets a letter from an attorney. This guy can't work anymore. He was on your premises. Well, didn't the guy have insurance? Nope. All of a sudden the owner goes, wait a second, I didn't hire him. Property management company hired him. Now property management's wrapped up. So now everyone's wrapped up in a lawsuit. Look, if you cut corners, eventually you are going to get wrapped up in a lawsuit and litigation.
Right.
And that's what I'm getting at is, you know, again, there is a cost of doing business. The cost of doing business could be you maybe pay a little bit more because you've got a living, breathing person in that property that is being watched and protected by governing agencies.
Yeah. If you're just tuning in, what we're talking about today is we're talking about, you know, being a landlord, some of the mistakes that people make, and how you can prepare for those situations. A couple of questions. Sally had another question. How often should I do inspections during the lease, and what do I do during the inspection?
Well, we do not do our inspections ourselves. We use a third-party vendor. Again, I'll give them a shout out. Pros Inspections. They're here. They're in San Antonio. They're in Houston. Great group of guys. And the reason we like a third party is, I'm going to say it costs like $80, right? But it's a third party company that's going in, and it's not like we're going in and now there's a conflict. He said, she said. This is just coming in, someone coming in going, that's worn, that's broken, that's broken, that's broken. We do our inspections twice a year, right? You don't want to do them every month. You don't want to do them every quarter. You got to let these people live, right? I mean, if you did your right job of screening that tenant on the front end, there should be less problems with that tenant taking care of their property, right? I'm not here to do adult daycare. I'm here to make sure that my asset is protected and that they're taking care of it. We recommend do it about month 3 because, you know, the first couple months, they're still moving in. There's shit and boxes everywhere. You're not going to see how they're living. So month 3 to see how they're doing, you know, is there a dog bowl that when there's no pets allowed?
Right.
You know, and then we do it on month 9. So the reason we do it on month 9 is on month 9, that is when we are going to renew the lease agreement with the tenant. Before we're going to renew the lease, so we send out the lease renewal 90 days prior. Before renewing the lease, we want to see how is this tenant treating the property.
Right.
Are they or do we want to release to them?
Right.
You know, so we have a third party company that goes out there and they give us a third party assessment. So there's no emotions. You're just looking at it objectively as the CEO of the company.
It seems like there's an overlying theme when you're a landlord, whether you're doing self-landlord or a company landlord of property management, and that is get as much third party as possible. At least that's what I'm hearing.
We like that for multiple reasons. Number one, it's scalability, it's leverage. You know, I don't want to have a maintenance guy on staff to just go do these inspections when it's cheaper to outsource it. So from a business perspective, it makes more sense. But also from a third party, like for example, rekeying a house, okay? People don't realize that per Texas property code, when a new tenant actually gets possession of the premises, you have to by law rekey that property. You have no choice. And it's not just the front key. You've got to make sure that it is up to Texas property code. Fire extinguishers, deadbolts, peepholes. There is a code that says that these have to be done when a new tenant moves in. And it's got to be signed off. So do I want to learn and stay up on Texas property code? Or do I just want to get a key company to say, go out there, rekey it, and bring it up to code and make sure that it is up to code?
So what do you think so if I have, what's the tipping point to actually start doing something like that? Because if I only have 2 houses, and when I say only, 2 houses is a lot more than the person has none.
Yeah, no.
But to say I have 2 houses, at what point does it make financial sense to do those third parties?
Well, I think it just depends. Again, going in, playing in this sandbox, of being a landlord, there's a lot of glass.
Right.
And if you're not prepared and know what you're doing, the other question is can you withstand a lawsuit by not doing it?
Right.
So my thing is when you, again, proper planning, when you go into this and say, okay, I'm going to have a property. What kind of things do I need to know? Well, I need to know that I need to screen the tenant properly. Do I want to take the time to learn fair housing laws, discrimination? Do I want to learn all those things on my own? If the answer is no, then I would say, okay, what's the next step? The next step is let me sub it out. So, for example, when it comes to let's just say the application process, the tenant pays for that. We don't pay for that. The tenant pays for the application screening. That's part of their application fee. So that covers it. So that's a zero cost you. When it comes to rekeying the property, you could do it. You could get it rekeyed once, make sure it's up to code, and then just change out the guts of the keys after you know it's actually up to code. But you also got to make sure, okay, have the laws changed?
Right.
Has Texas Property Code changed any laws?
Because one thing I did learn when I was in high school is ignorance of a law is not a defense.
Absolutely.
Of a law. So driving in a school zone that you didn't know was a school zone
does not negate, doesn't give you a freebie.
It's not a valid defense.
Yeah,
no.
Exactly. And so one of the things I try to tell people is that, when you have a property and, again, you're up against something, you have to be able to prove it. And, again, it's a matter of just having systems in place. So you say, okay, you know what, it's going to cost me, I could rekey it and get my maintenance guy out there for, $50, $20, $30, or I could just pay rekey for $99.
Right.
You just got to, my thing is plug that into the business model, plug that into your numbers so that when you're doing that, you go, okay, what are some expenses I'm going to have? It's just part of doing business. It's kind of like buying a car and going, I don't think I should ever have to change the oil. Because I bought the car and I'm paying my GMAC mortgage and my car payment. I should never have to change the oil. I should never have to get windshield wipers. I should never have to get new tires. Because I shouldn't have to.
Right.
Well, you're going to drive and all of a sudden you're going to get a flat and your engine's going to blow and you're going to go, that's weird. I pay my car payment. Why should I have to do all that?
Right.
It's just part of owning a car.
It's just the way you have to look at it mentally.
It's just the way you look at it. But again, and part of your education is us talking about, why you own property. Because these are small potatoes compared to the reason that people actually own real estate. And that's a whole other conversation. But, there's so many reasons why owning real estate is good. Again, you can learn to fly a plane and figure it out and navigate it yourself and do all this. Or you can go, you know what? I don't even want to know about this. What does it cost to just push it off and just have someone else leverage that? And, what is your time worth?
So I got a question here from Derek. I always say his last name wrong, so I'm not even going to do it. Morel. I always mess up, and he gets mad at me every time.
It's all right. He's not here.
Well, he's here. He's saying, do you guys manage properties that have a lease option agreement, and even if it's 100 days or less?
We don't do it with the lease option because, again, that starts getting into equitable interest, and there's obviously a lot more. We make cheese pizzas. We take a standard rental property and we rent it out, and to us, that's just what we do. I know about lease options. I've done them. I get it. But I don't want to get involved in a he said, she said, because I wasn't there at the inception of that lease option to know what was going on, where all of a sudden we are stepping into a spaghetti mess of potential problems, and so we don't do that.
So if you have questions, jump in. We got a whole list here, but let's try to get 2 or 3 more, maybe like a juicy story out of this.
Yeah. So
because we're getting close to the end.
Yeah.
So anyway, what I was saying is, so drop in comments. We're giving away the book 10X today. So we'll do a random comment picker, and if you're picked, you'll get the book 10X. But to get entered, just keep on asking questions, saying hi, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So one of the bigger problems is the rent collection process.
Right.
Because everyone's afraid of that eviction, right? They're afraid this is big bad thing that scares them. It's just a process. Like you said, we've evicted tenants, and we're nice to them. They'll even come back to us down the road. We're not going to re-rent from them, but they'll say, like, hey, can I re-rent from you? I was in a bad way. Like I said, it's the biggest challenge I think investors have, number one, or landlords, is that they take it personal. Because they didn't have rules or they didn't follow their own rules and they bent their rules, all of a sudden they feel emotionally slighted, like they were taken advantage of.
Right.
And the reality is the tenant knows that rent is due, and they know what's going to happen if they don't pay their rent. They have $1,500 in bills. They have a $1,000 payment. Which one? Who are they going to be able to push? They know that if they go to Exxon gas station and try to pump gas and they don't have that money, they're not getting any gas out of there. They know that. They go, well, who can I push? Who can I slide? They go, well, let me just see if I can slide the landlord a bit. So I'm going to tell them a story.
Well, on that, it's kind of interesting because and there's like the shift, and this is very anecdotal, but it seems like there's been a shift in mindset because 30 years ago, no matter what, you made your house payment, and if your car payment suffered, fine, but you're not losing your house,
right.
You're not losing your roof.
Yeah.
Fast forward 2018, 2010s,
yeah.
2008,
yeah.
It's like, no, you got to keep your car because without a car, I have no job, I have no transportation, so I can always sleep in my car. I can't take my house to work.
Well, and again, it goes back to picking the right tenant that realizes that, you know what, your number one priority is a roof over your head. Because if you don't pay your rent, it's not going to work. And we explained to the tenant, listen, if you don't pay your rent, we are going to file the eviction. We are going to evict you, and then we are going to sue you for what's left over, and we're going to come after you with debt collectors. So if you cannot pay your rent, if you're not one of those people that can pay your rent on time, you probably shouldn't rent from us because it's not going to end good for you because we are going to come after you. So we want you to rent from us, but we want you to be on time. And I think the biggest challenge that a lot of landlords have is that when they are trying to, again, be nice and be buddies and they let the tenant slide, once they file that eviction, here's a mistake a lot of landlords make. They file that eviction, or maybe they're getting up to that point, and they're talking to the tenant. So let's say, for example, rent is $1,500 a month, and they file the eviction finally. What you do at that point is you've now taken the earnest off of you, and you've put it on them. It's no longer my emergency now. When that constable comes and knocks on the door and says, you're being evicted, all of a sudden shit just got real for them. They're going, whoa. And when they call you, do you work a deal with them or do you want it all? So the challenge is let's say they say, I have $500. You take that $500. Let's say I have $50. Once you accept any money from them, you are no longer evicting for $1,500 in rent. So what happens is you go to court and the judge says, how much are you evicting for? It's already in the paperwork, $1,500. And they go, wait a second, I paid $500. Oh, you accepted $500? Yeah. Okay, well, you're no longer evicting for $1,500. So this information is incorrect. Case dismissed. You have to refile.
Right.
So the biggest mistake landlords make is they try to work a deal and they try to take some money. Once you file that eviction, that forcible detainer in court, you do not take anything unless it's full rent.
Do you stop communication altogether?
Yeah. What's the point? We explain to them, look, we want you to stay. If you can come up with the money before court starts, we'd love for you to stay. But you got to have your rent, your late payments, and your court costs all at once. And we are not taking a check, sorry. It's got to be certified funds.
Right.
And so that, again, that's how we run the business. And that's how you have to be very diligent in that. And don't bend the rules. And don't harass the tenant.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's plenty of stories, videos, pictures on
I've seen
Facebook of the evictions and, people putting on the curb. And if, I don't want to say if you don't have the heart, but if you don't have the capability of putting another human being through that, maybe not get into the rental business.
Well, I think.
But again, though, it's not you doing that; it's them doing it to themselves.
Well, a couple of things. Number one, I would say if you don't do that, hire someone to do it. Leverage it out.
Right.
I don't like taking my trash and throwing it in the dump. So what do? There's a trash company that does it.
Right.
So there's people that can do these kind of things. There's a mindset shift from being an investor to being a landlord.
Right.
And that's, I think, what we're talking about. The landlord is the one that wants to run to Home Depot and check SKUs, and they want to be the one that's doing it all. The investor is the one that says, I have a team and I want to leverage that out.
And I want to get another one of those.
And I want to get another one. And I'm going to make my money off of leverage because, look, we all know real estate works.
Right.
And some way or another, there's not another vehicle like real estate that we could buy that can get us such a high return for depreciation, equity capture, appreciation, all of that. The problem is people put their emotions into it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what messes it up, right? Because if they just said, hey, you know what? This is a business. I have properties that my company manages, but I've got rental properties that I have seen maybe one time. I've never seen them again. I don't want to see them. It's just, I get a lot of people that will buy stuff from out of state, right? And I had a guy he was in San Francisco. He wanted to buy something. So he says, hey, I want to fly down. I think I got this house, and I got it under contract. I want to fly down and see it. I said, oh, okay. I said, well, are you an appraiser? He says, no. And I said, okay, well, are you an inspector? He said, no. And I go, well, I'm not sure. What are you going to contribute to this? He goes, what do you mean? He goes, I said, well, how you're going to see 4 walls and a roof.
Right.
It's the business that's going to make it work or not work. It's not the fact that it's 4 walls and a roof. I'm like, he goes, well, I just want to see it. I'm like, why would you want to waste your time? The biggest challenge,
and money, yeah.
The biggest challenge investors we all have is we don't value our time.
I think it goes back to, because I used to work in the oil and gas, and people would want to see like the wells that they're buying, and a lot of that is to make sure that there really is a house.
I want to touch it, you know.
I want to touch it. I want to make sure there's a structure.
Yep.
And I totally understand that. But
Absolutely.
once you've vetted the partners that you have employed,
absolutely,
maybe
trust
not.
but verify.
Yeah, trust, verify.
Yeah,
exactly.
Exactly. And I tell them, I said, listen, you get a contract. You get a team, you get it appraised, you get it inspected, you get the reports. As CEO, you're not the one who's down there climbing under to check the pier and beams. You're up there as a CEO looking at the data, testing and measuring to see, does this financially make sense and does it align with your goal?
So I think you could take this little nugget and apply it to all things real estate investor, not just the landlord aspect of it, because is your time, if say you're doing a big bandit sign marketing campaign, is your time worth staying up all night, writing out signs and then dropping them? Or can you leverage somebody else's time?
Exactly.
Do you have a 16-year-old, 18-year-old niece or somebody who can come in and make signs for you?
Or we were talking earlier about letter drops versus internet.
Right.
What's your time worth? What's the best return on your money? And I tell people, look, if you want to come to Dallas or Houston on vacation and you want to happen to see your property, rock on, no problem. But don't come here specifically to say, I want to see 4 walls and roof. That's just telling me that you're not understanding the power of leverage.
Well, I mean, you're a pilot, so if I'm in San Francisco, what's a typical last-minute flight to Dallas or Houston?
Probably $500-600.
So $500-600, and on a $1,500 house, assuming they have a mortgage on it, the cash flow on that, how many months of cash flow is it going to take to pay off that ticket?
Well, and that's my other question. I tell them, I go, are you factoring that into your acquisition cost? And they go, what do you mean? I say, well, you've got airline costs, you've got hotel, you've got accommodations. All that needs to be factored into the acquisition of your deal now.
Right.
So if you want to come down every time, that is going to cut into your appreciation or your cash flow or you got to factor. They're like, oh, I never thought about it. I'm like, well, you're running a business. This is part of running the business. This is not just it's a hobby. And that's what I'm trying to get across to them.
Because you got to think about it. If you're not factoring in those, like, wouldn't it be cool costs? Like, wouldn't it be cool to see the house?
Yeah.
Go down there, take a flight. It's the same thing with any aspect of the business, but if you're not factoring those costs associated with that house, I've got a 99% return on my money on this. Like, well, did you really?
Yeah,
Because you spent about $100 million going to visit.
What did that cost you to leave your job to come down? And it goes, I equate that to do you own stock? Mm-hmm. They say, yeah. I go, well, before you buy Chase stock, do you go to Chase building and stick your head in the board of directors meeting and see what's going on? And hey guys, what are we doing over here today?
And just go further down this rabbit hole on the acquisition side. Maybe it's not even just out of town, but every time you drive to a house, granted, gas costs are not compared to like what you'll make on a deal, but your time, your money, all of it.
You're not looking at another deal because you're worried about if you don't have the right team, then you need to get a better team.
Right, because if you're like, hey, I made $10,000 on this wholesale deal, well, that wholesale deal took you 3 months to get, and it also took 20 hours a week to close.
Yeah, and people don't factor in that. They don't factor those things in. All those things get washed away. It's like, well, what could you have been doing with your time to make you more money, a higher return?
Right.
It's like dealing, again, I even equate, if a self-landlord buys a bad property, our problem is we bought a bunch of shitty properties, and it never once came to our minds that, you know what, we could sell these. Like, we kept thinking, how do we fix this? How do we fix this? Like, we can fix this situation. We can double down. We can this. Finally, Pete says, why don't we just sell them? And I thought, can we?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, we could sell them. And you know what? Some of those deals we sold at a loss. We came to closing with money, and we were the happiest ones.
I think, it's funny on that, and we're really rabbit holing here, but it's all good. It's our show. We can do whatever we want. Is in real estate, sometimes a small loss now is better than a big loss later.
Absolutely.
Because the small loss now, yes, there's a financial impact, but the biggest thing is the big loss later, not only is it a bigger money loss, but you've got the stress, you've got potential medical bills because of heart attacks.
Oh man,
you've got how many sleepless nights, all that can be factored in. And if you're not factoring that in, if you don't have an analytical person on your team, find somebody to add to your team who can do those analytics.
Yep.
And if you are a big softy teddy bear like myself, find people to be on your team that aren't so soft.
Absolutely.
That
Yeah.
can't be pushed around, that are just like tough as nails or
It's
whatever.
so true because, again, I know I can talk myself into any deal. I can justify why I can take a shitty property and make it a good deal of why I can make it work. But the numbers don't lie. And you need someone third party to sit back and look at this and go, wait a second. These you can make them look however you want. And I'm great at convincing myself that something could be a good deal. But again, not only the money that's tied up, but the mental stress. And I keep stressing that because unless you've been in that situation where you have these properties just dragging you down, man, I mean, you wake up in the morning and I remember looking at my phone thinking, oh my God, I hope I don't need another tenant calling me. And there'd be like 5 missed calls. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I did a video the other day talking about the 4th of the month. I used to hate the 4th of the month because that's when I found out, okay, rent was due on the 1st. We let it slide to the 3rd. The 4th is when we came down and decided, okay, who didn't pay? Who's getting evictions? And it was like, okay, how many do we have this month? Is it 3? Is it 10? Is it what? And that's a very. It's like why am I doing this?
And that's the thing is, if again, speaking in terms of just everything, if you're so stressed you're not answering the phone, well, guess what? Some of those phone calls could be a deal.
Absolutely.
If you're so stressed that your mind is concentrating on something else and you're scrolling through emails, you might miss your next deal.
Yeah, and people they don't look at the big picture of that. And again, I go back, I was one of them, that it's so important to look at these things like, I just go back, it's the business model.
It's business, yeah.
And why are you doing this? And again, we got out of those deals, we sold those properties, and the people we sold them to, we were very frank, like, look, these are shitty deals. We're selling them at a great price, but they were shitty deals because they didn't match our business model.
Right.
They're a great deal. One of the guys who took them, he did great with them. He's got them. He's making a lot of money with them because he has a different business model wrapped around him. That's awesome. I mean, I'm happy for him. We just did not have the right business model.
Right. Well, a couple more questions, and we'll go to and after we'll get one more point, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
But Helen, thank you. She said I looked uncommonly handsome today.
Oh,
I guess that means every other day I look like shit, but I'll take the compliment. She was asking, how do you figure out what the new codes are? She's got 5 houses and constantly trying to figure out what's changed.
That's a tough one. Again, I go back to I hire the people that are responsible for those. So, Texas property code changes all the time. I mean, it's, and unfortunately, you don't know when that law changes until you're standing in front of the judge. And they go, you didn't know the law changed. That's not our responsibility to show you.
Ignorance, yeah.
You got to know those things. And that's part of the business model of staying up on Texas property code because it does change. People don't realize. A simple example is if it's over a certain degree in the house, you only have so many hours to fix an air conditioning system if it's broken, or you have to put them up in a hotel. People are like, really? I didn't know that. Yeah, and then if you live in California and San Francisco where they don't even own air conditioners, you're trying to explain to this guy that's 1,000 degrees in the house, and he's like, well, it's cool here. You're like, well, yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Like, why are we even having this discussion, And that's the thing. It's setting those expectations. So that's part of the job of being, if you're going to self-manage, you have to be on top of those Texas property codes and you have to know them. I mean,
wherever you are in the country.
Wherever you are in the country, because every state has property codes and you've got to be aware of those. Australia, I do a lot of stuff in Australia. They're actually the other way. 90% of the people don't even manage their properties. They hand them to a management company because the laws are so strict and so stringent that they have what's called tribunals. The tenants have all these rights, and I mean, it's to be a landlord there is very, very tough.
The way you said, tenants have rights.
Yeah.
What the absurdity?
It's amazing.
Why would they have rights?
Yeah.
No. So let's find us one last good point. Let's wrap up so we can get on with the day.
So based on that, we'll talk about fixing things. Who's responsible? So that's a big one. Is it cosmetic or is it structural?
Okay.
Is it in the lease? Is it not? So one of the biggest challenge that landlords do is they put this scary service charge in there. I'm going to charge you a $250 trip charge, right? So now, again, it's in the lease. If you're sending them out there, you better charge them for that trip charge because it is in the contract. So then it's like, well, when do I charge them? When do I not? So a leaky pipe. Do you charge them? Do you not charge them? You charge them, they're going to go, well, shit, I'm not going to call you again. I'll let the pipe leak. Now you took a $50 fix and it's thousands of dollars in mold. But you put it in the lease agreement. So my first point is don't put it in the contract if you're not going to enforce it.
Okay.
So now let's go back to cosmetic or structural. So let's say a tenant calls and the window broke. Okay, well, we didn't break the window, so we will go out there and repair it. but it's your bill.
Right.
We'll fix it. Absolutely. We'll get it taken care of. But it's not the owner's responsibility. It is your responsibility. Now, flash that to Texas property code. Are you making the house unsafe or uninhabitable for them to live in? That's the key that owners need to realize is don't get into a pissing match over the doorbell being broken. You want to fix it, you can say, no, I'm not fixing it. You could say, I will fix it, but I don't have to fix it, but I will fix it because you're a good client. And what people don't realize is when it comes to fixing, not fixing things, they get into this pissing match with the tenant. And there is something to be said about customer service. They are the client. Believe it or not, if they don't pay their rent, you cannot pay your mortgage. So you need to, at some level, treat them with customer service because in this society, they can go down the street and they can rent the same house for about the same amount of money with the same amount of stuff.
Right.
They're the client. They can move on if they if they are not satisfied with their services. But it's, again, setting the expectation and letting the tenant know, hey, look, if this is cosmetic, you are responsible for it. We will send out a vendor, we will get it repaired, but it is your bill. If it is a structurally unsafe or unsound situation, like the roof collapsing, the hot water heater being out, the air conditioner, absolutely, we will do it. Your toilet's not clogged, it's not an emergency. Your toilet's clogged, it's not an emergency. Your toilet's clogged and there's only one bathroom in the house, now it's an emergency. Now it's an unsafe or uninhabitable situation. Now, we go to that property, our vendor pulls out a Barbie doll, guess whose bill it is?
Right.
It's the tenant's bill, it's not the owner's bill. Owner did not shove a Barbie doll down the toilet.
But if like a root has cut off a pipe, well, that's not obviously.
And then we tell the owner, look, we cannot charge this to the tenant. We cannot charge them a trip charge. This was making their house unsafe or uninhabitable. So again, that's the distinction. So my point is know what is unsafe and uninhabitable and know what is cosmetic. And when you know those, that will help you to make your decisions as to whether or not you're going to fix something. And make sure you have that conversation with the tenant when they move in.
There you go. Wrapping it up, any final thoughts, any last minute tips, goal setting, etc.?
It's mid-year. So obviously what I would suggest with a lot of investors, something that they can do is look at your portfolio, if you own properties or if you're going to buy properties, set it out in a very, linear, what is it doing? What should it be doing? And reassess your portfolio. If it's not performing, and again, if somebody wants to talk to me, I talk to people all the time. I don't need to manage your house to help you, right? If you just call me and say, hey, I got a question. I don't understand this. Can you explain this to me? Is this a deal I should keep or I should not keep? I'm just going to give you my advice as an investor, and I'm going to give you my opinion. And what I try to tell people is look at it as the CEO of a company, not as your money. And sit there and say, okay, my plan was to get a 20% return. I'm getting a 15% return. So my first question is there anything we can do to increase that? Can you make it nicer? Can you this? Can you that? If the answer is no, then it's like, okay, you either accept 15% or you got to sell one of the shitty properties that's dragging the portfolio down. But again, I would say because it's mid-year, it's probably a good time to assess your portfolio and say, is there anything I can do? Am I on track to my financial wealth of where I want to be when I retire? Do I have am I on track with my goals? What can I do to increase those goals? And look at it from an objectively, perspective as opposed to, we all get so in the heat of battle, right? We're all in the weeds. We're all battling it out. Sometimes you got to step back and take a breath. You got to take a breath, kind of go, okay, am I on track with my goals in life? Am I where I want to be right now? Am I where I should be? And I think a lot of us, we're always going, I'll do that next week. I'll do that later. I'll do that later.
Yeah.
And we forget that the whole reason we're doing this is not to heat a battle, it's for a goal. There's a reason down the road, and we forget that in the heat of battle. So I would just say, take some time to reflect. And if anyone wants my information of our security deposit or, we give away everything for free.
So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of you?
Sure. They can go online, EmpireIndustriesLLC.com. They can go on Facebook. They can like us on Facebook.
Tagged in this video?
Tagged us there. They can give us a call, 888-866-6727. We're in multiple cities across Texas, expanding more. So, again, and if somebody just wants to talk to us and get perspective or opinion, we're here to help.
And again, the whole reason you're here today is because we're going to be shooting some academy videos for property management and landlording, and that'll be rolling out fairly soon.
Yep.
That's all I got.
That's all I
hey,
got,
thanks
man.
for coming in
Hey,
today.
no problem.
As far as the winner for the book, it was Tennille Logan. So, Tennille, please just hit me up with a DM, and we'll get you hooked up with a book.
Little 10X, huh? Nice,
Yeah, a little
man.
10X book.
I like that
but
guy.
the thing is, like, in our mindset is like, okay, we could put money behind, give money to Facebook to boost the post, or we could just reward our community for hanging out with us, commenting,
Absolutely, man.
sharing it, and instead of money going to Zuckerberg, it's like, hey, here's some knowledge coming at you.
And despite what people think, it's not a very big community in general. Real estate investors, I know people
Everybody
all
knows
over. Everybody knows everybody, and for you guys to be able to help people the way you're helping them, my hat's off to you, because there's not many people that a lot of these people do it with an underlying theme. There's something underlying. You guys are doing it just to do it.
Yeah.
And that's great that you guys are doing that, because there's not many people out there. And I tell people all the time, like, look, I'll talk to you. I don't need to charge you. Because I just think the more people I help, the more it helps me.
Right. To be clear, there is an agenda. We would love everybody to be subscribers at Propelio.
Sure.
And that being said, what Propelio.com is, we are a tech company for real estate investors, providing you with access to MLS comps, access to off-market lead lists, and access to investor-friendly websites. And then we've got a lot more coming out here in the future. But Steven, thank you so much for coming in.
My pleasure.
Everybody, thank you so much for watching. My biggest takeaways from this morning has been running like a business, take your emotional out, and look into third party.
Yeah,
like
outsource.
as an investor, your goal should be finding new deals.
Make your money from here up.
Yeah, that's the nugget there.
There you go.
If you like swinging a hammer, well,
Nothing wrong with that, but it's
Not at all.
leveraging your time.
leverage your time.
Yep.
But anyway, thanks so much for coming in, for hanging out with us. We'll see you next time, and that's all I got. So,
See you guys.
bye.